Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's race is actually a recycled race from only a few months ago, and while the meta car has changed just a little bit, the anti-meta remains the same. Let's get into it. Like I said before, the anti-meta car for this same combo that we've seen before is the same. However, the big difference is tuning is now allowed. Because of that, there will be some subtle changes in how the car behaves, so we're going to go ahead and go over the guide one more time. With that said, this car is really fantastic on tires, it handles incredibly well, and it has just enough power to both attack and defend against the meta car and others. Before settling on the McLaren, I had actually tried a few different cars as the anti-meta car, and because of that, the car that I set a time with is actually the Genesis. But the McLaren, I did get a .411, which is really close to this, and with this being 54th globally, it's not too bad. A big shout out to our friend Mihao and of course Super Chicken for helping me put this tune together. I copied Mihao's tune and then made some tweaks based on Super Chicken's suggestions, and I really like the way it feels. For our first braking zone, we're going to look at the meter boards on the left, and when we get all the way past this first 100 meter board, but before the red lines in the fence, we're going to hit the brakes heavily. Start turning in at the 50 and then start trail braking and get all the way down to first gear. I should have cut this a little bit tighter and gone in so I can angle myself and get on the throttle a lot earlier, but instead I kept up a little bit more momentum and I was lucky that I didn't slide out. You really want to get on the throttle as early as you possibly can, and you can do that by slowing down even more and cutting that angle even more than I did. Eau Rouge and Radeon are completely flat. You want to make sure that you're not lifting whatsoever, but we're going to angle ourselves by cutting as much of this corner as we can without going over the white line, riding the curb right when you see the black tires there, and then we're going to go straight through this part of the curb. And you can definitely put the outside tires on that colored part of the curb as long as you don't go completely over it. You'll be fine. The fuel cutoff when you hit the rev limiter is going to be right about 162 miles per hour, but it's not always there, so I always shift at 161 regardless of where I am. Instead of the meter boards, we're going to look for the curb itself, and when you find yourself entirely on the curb, both front and rear left tires, that's when we're going to brake. Turn in early enough so that you're on the pavement before the end of the curb. Get to second gear and get as close to the bollards as you can. See that I'm adding throttle here, but I'm only using a little bit to make sure that I don't slide. As we turn left here, instead of trying to get ourselves all the way to the left, we're going to make sure that we look at the colored part of the wall on the right, and when we get all the way past that, we're going to start turning in for the next corner. Now we're going to continue accelerating as we go towards that corner. We're going to lift mid-corner and upshift to third rather than lift, then turn in. It's important to keep up your momentum through this whole sequence rather than set up and sacrifice the first two corners for that big exit. Once again, the colored curb on the left is our reference for braking, and right when we get to it, that's when we're going to hit the brakes. I like using a double apex approach to this corner, so we're going to dive immediately towards the inside curb, hit that first apex, and start trail braking. Once we see that second bollard, we're going to know that we're about halfway through, and our second apex should be right after the third bollard. Continue steering as your car swings out wide, and we're going to look for the red marks on the fence to the right. As we approach the outside curb, the red marks directly after that will signal for us to start turning in, and we're going to clip the curb at the second red marks in the distance. Lifting after we've turned in, we're going to dab the brakes just slightly so we can get as close to the bollards as we can without touching them, and then back fully on the throttle, making sure you keep two tires on the pavement, because if you go all the way on the curb, it won't negate your lap, but it can make you slide out. As we approach the next braking zone, we're going to look for the 50 meter board, but beyond that, beyond the fence is a rock, and that rock is actually our braking point. Immediately trail braking and turning in, we want to hit this apex really early because it's going to be a double apex kind of corner. I downshifted to third, though it's not necessary. I just wanted to get extra rotation. It might have actually just slowed me down. We do want to hit this second apex and then keep staying on the throttle so we can track all the way out to the outside of the corner. Our next braking point is a little bit tricky. We obviously want to look for the meter boards on the side, but right before we get underneath the sign above, that's when we're going to brake. Briefly getting to full brake, we're going to start turning in right after we get over that line, then to third gear, again close to the bollards without hitting them, back on the throttle, and go to the middle of the track before turning in, lifting off, and again brushing the brakes as close to the bollards as you can without hitting them, and being very careful as we track out. If you go all the way onto the green, it won't necessarily negate your lap, but it will make you slide. Our next braking point is the curb on the outside to the left here. Right as soon as we get on the brakes, we're going to trail brake very lightly, trying to get off the brakes as early as we can without completely letting off of them in one really quick motion. You still have to trail brake, but it's going to be a lot shorter than usual. Get on the throttle in second gear as fast as you can, go all the way up onto the colored curb, and for this next corner, we're going to turn in real early, trying to get as close to this bollard. I'm sure you're sensing a pattern here without touching it, and if you can get up on the curb but without hitting the bollard, it will rotate you a little bit so you can stay full throttle without going all the way off the track on the left. Any full throttle section requires you to steer as little as you possibly can because any kind of steering, any kind of friction you add is going to slow you down. So just be very gentle and very deliberate with any kind of wheel movement that you make. Making sure you're tracking out to the left, right between the 150 and 100 meter boards, exactly in the middle is your braking point with this car. Keep your eye on the 50 meter board to the left because that is when we're going to start turning in. We want to get to first gear after we've started turning in and cut this curb as much as we can. We want to go straight towards the outside of the curb and turn in really early. If you hit the sausage, it can rotate you, but it can rotate you too much. First gear has a lot of grip with this car, so stay in first, get on that throttle as early as you can, and make your way all the way to the finish line. All right, let's watch full speed. Like I said in the breakdown, I didn't quite slow down enough and I didn't get as close to the apex as I should have. In fact, I completely missed it, but I did keep up a little bit extra speed. You're going to go a lot faster if you make sure that you get really close to that apex, almost V up that corner and just point towards the exit and get on the throttle as early and as hard as you can. Obviously, it's full throttle through this section, but don't take too much of that inside curb on the right-hander going up Radeon because it can make you spin really easily. It's especially important in the race because the fuel weight will give that added bit of danger. This entire section coming up is all about maintaining your momentum and getting on the throttle, sneaking in as much throttle as you can. You'll see I'm on the throttle before the left-hander, I'm on the throttle as early as I can, and then I stay on the throttle and lift just barely as I go through the right-hander there. This corner is a double apex and it's also downhill. It can be really easy to slide out, so make sure that you're really careful about balancing the brake. If you're on full brake and you turn in, you're going to slide out. If you don't brake enough, you're going to slide out. So it really is just a balancing act, using the brakes to help you control where the car is going. The left-hander, named after Jackie Eakes, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, I'm sorry, is really important and really difficult. Make sure you stay off that curb as much as you can, and I believe this is Puhan. I might be mistaken on that, but it is a double apex. You want to hit both of them. I don't think you need to downshift to third like I did. Like is always the case with any kind of S or switchback, we're not necessarily trying to get all the way to the right here before the left. We just want to get to the middle of the track and, of course, focus on carrying as much momentum as we can. This right-hander right here can be really tricky. You want to be off the brakes as early as you can, and then the right-hander onto this back straight is really important. Turning in too early will cause you to hit the bollard, which can make you spin, and if you don't turn in early enough, you're going to go off the track, which can result in dirty tires. It'll ruin your lap, and of course you can spin there too. This car is incredible through here, so there's pretty much never any drama unless you're on softs that are worn or if you're on medium tires following someone closely, but if there's nothing like that, you can just stay full throttle. Be really brave on the brakes here, and of course you want to cut this curb as much as you can. You can actually cut it even more than I did. Cutting the left-hander too much will cause you to rotate. You can use that to your advantage, but it can be tricky. Good luck. So I had an immensely difficult time trying to get, one, a good race done, but also just deciding what car I want to be the anti-meta car. And part of that is a good thing because it really means that there are a lot of different options. I spent a lot of time testing different cars. I tried the Genesis, I tried the M6, I tried the BRZ, I tried the Ford GT, GT40 GT, the Spec 2, and honestly, all of them work. But I didn't quite love any of them as much as I love the 650S. And I kind of didn't want to use the 650 because it was the same anti-meta car that we used the last time that we had this same race. But I guess if it's not broke, you ain't got to fix it. So starting in 12th place, we have a pretty stacked lobby. It's a lot of the really fast guys who do dailies. We've got Sosa and Bacon Slayers behind us. We've got Grumpy Pants. We've got Rataka. We've got Mihao. We've got Grove Street. So it was going to be a really challenging race no matter what. And that is really a good opportunity to showcase what the car can actually do. I'm certain I mentioned this a lot, but at the beginning of the race, you will have cold tires. And if you're starting from the back, I always suggest using the harder compound. So that is going to be a compounded effect when you have the cold tires and the harder compound. This is probably something that a lot of you have already thought about, but it's not something I had really consciously thought about until maybe even a year into competing in this game. But when it comes to the beginning of races, you are going to be pretty much in the opposite of optimal conditions with your tires and just the race conditions with dirty air and other cars in front and behind you. And when you're in time trial, you're going to be in essentially perfect conditions. So if you spend a lot of time in time trial, but you haven't spent a lot of time in the race or practicing race pace when it comes to one of like the competitive races, then it's going to be very, very different. And one thing that I see a lot of people do is try to take every single corner the exact same as they would in the time trial, and it's simply not going to work. So don't be afraid to mess with the gears that you use in certain corners. Don't be afraid to take some corners slower, because yeah, it's going to be a lot different, and in general, you're just going to go a lot slower. I've talked frequently about when it's appropriate to pass someone versus when it's not. For instance, if you think that you can really cleanly get past someone in any given corner, then usually it's just a good idea. However, if you think you can get past someone, even if it is an easy pass, it's not always going to be the best time. Now, I don't think it necessarily would have been really easy to pass Robbie, but I saw a few different opportunities that I had. However, he's in the Porsche, and what we know about the Porsche is that it handles really well, and it does not have very good top speed. So, knowing that, if I wait until I'm on the back straight, like I did, I'm going to have the opportunity to pass him then while not slowing us down, trying to pass him in a position where both of our cars are going to be fast. When we have fairly equal machines, then it's probably going to slow us both down. But if I just wait behind until I can pass him on a straight, it's going to be infinitely better for the race in the long run. As you can see, I was able to easily get past him, some light defending, and we're already back on the bumper of Grumpy Pants. Now, you've probably noticed that a few people went into the pits on lap 1. That is totally fine with some cars. The McLaren actually is probably one of the few cars that can get away with it. The issue is, if anything goes wrong and you're using that strategy, then it could completely ruin it. For instance, if you take that strategy and then you end up in dirty air because multiple other people took that strategy, or if you happen to spin out or get too many penalties, you might wear your tires more than you normally would. If you can guarantee yourself clean air by pitting really early, then it is a better option than pitting on lap 2 with a lot of traffic. But pitting on lap 2 with traffic is still a lot safer, so it's up to you. It's always really important to pay attention to the complexion of the race, see exactly what's happening, and try to make your decisions based on your knowledge of what could possibly happen in the best and the worst case scenario. Speaking of dirty air, if I were trying to take care of these tires, I probably wouldn't stay this close to Grumpy Pants. I might, but probably not. The closer you are to someone without actually passing them, the worse the dirty air is going to be. And the worse the dirty air is, the more tire wear it's going to cause. However, these are the medium tires, the harder compound, and they're going to last just one more lap at max. They're only going to need to last one more lap at max because we're going to switch them off for the softs. If you're only doing 2 laps on this tire compound, you don't have to worry about the wear whatsoever, so you can really just chew through them. Do whatever you need to, be as aggressive as you want, use more steering angle, do whatever, because honestly, it just doesn't matter. You're going to throw them away after the pit stop. So right now we're about halfway through lap 2 of 8, and because I remember this race, I can tell you nothing really interesting happens, except Ritaka almost going off there, but he recovered really well. Nothing really interesting happens, so we're going to jump to the exit of our pit stop that we're going to make at the end of this lap. Here's another interesting part of the strategy that I talk about pretty frequently, but it's not something you can necessarily do really easily. If you can nurture relationships with people that you race with, then they can help you along in various ways. One of those ways is bump drafting. So you're going to see that F1 Slayers behind me, also known as Bacon Slayers, is giving me a couple bumps. He bumps me there, and he's going to give me one more bump after that. That means that we can stay within Ritaka's slip, both of us. If he were to pass me right there, we'd probably both be out of Ritaka's slip. And even though that might benefit us in the second sector, it's not going to benefit us by not having his slipstream on the straights. So by working together in certain situations, you can ensure that you don't have to worry about any kind of traffic, and you can go even faster than you would go by yourself. The fastest you can go by yourself is definitely going to be with no dirty air in front of you. However, if you have friends who can push you along the straight or just trade places with you as you're slipstreaming, then you can go even faster than that. It can be a really interesting dynamic, and it can be a lot like martial arts. in the respect that he's going to help you along at the beginning or the middle of the race, but if we get to the end and we're really close, he's going to try to pass me, as he should, because that's how you're going to get better with your friends. And in martial arts, if you're sparring with someone, they're not going to do you any favors by not trying to take your head off. By giving you the best challenge that they possibly can, they're going to do you every favor trying to make you better. And it's the same in racing. It's all about the timing. If you can work together when you are trying to get in front of everyone else, but then fight towards the end and fight hard, then you'll all benefit. With all that said, absolutely nothing interesting happened until lap 5, so we're going to jump forward. So jumping forward to lap 6, actually, I thought it was 5. It's actually the end of lap 5, lap 6. Ritaka has gotten really far ahead. Slayers is still on my butt, and we're just trying to stay clean. I almost go off there. You'll notice that the Supra goes off, and Ritaka tries to slip on the inside, and instead gets pushed into the wall all the way off the track, and then he tries to do it again. And I really don't like calling people out. This isn't the place for it. This is not the platform for it, but this guy has had an issue with pretty much every single person that I know on track. He's pushed me off track multiple times. I've watched him do the exact same thing he just did to Ritaka. Ritaka now has damage, so it ruined his race, but it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. If you've met a jerk, you've met a jerk. But if everyone you meet is a jerk, you're the jerk. So the fact that Mike has had an issue with, honestly, I counted 8 people this week, I think it's safe to say that Mike's the jerk. So anyways, if you're in top split in the Americas region, just be aware of that guy. He's being really wild this week. He's usually not that crazy, but this week he's just being absolutely wild. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, I digress. Thanks to that, thanks to him pushing Ritaka off the track and giving him damage, I now am in 5th place. And Slayers was not able to stay that close because he had to navigate the traffic that Mike caused. So I guess thanks, Mike, but yeah, these are the things that we have to deal with. We're actually going to jump ahead to almost the very end of the race because the strategy that we employed worked almost perfectly. It worked really well for us, unfortunately not for Ritaka, but we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the end of the race. So let's jump ahead. Starting on the harder compounds at the beginning and then moving on to the softer compound, pitting really early can give you a lot of clean air. And if you can do that somewhere towards the middle of the pack, it can actually be better than starting in the front and using the soft tires first. If you can imagine a situation where you're in a car that might not have a ton of power and the beginning of the track features a really long straight, you might actually be at a disadvantage starting off in the front, which is kind of funny to think about. And since I had such a clean, soft stint with Slayers pushing us through, I was able to get so close to Mihao, who started, I think, in pole position, maybe in 2nd place, that I almost got him here at the end. Now, a lot of luck played out in my favor, and he probably had some bad luck. He's a very fast driver, but he makes a tiny mistake here, and I almost got him at the finish line. Not quite. Anyways, that's why this strategy works really well. If you're at the back, start on the harder compound, hit early, and then try to get the cleanest soft stint that you possibly can. As always, thank you very much for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be making another one of these guides next week. Thank you.